Today we're going to talk about how to live over 100 years. Then we're going to get into 18 scientifically proven tips on exactly how to do it in a practical way. I'm going to make it super simple. I'm also going to give you a summarization after I dissected certain countries that have more people that live over 100 years old than any other country in the world. I don't know if you know how old I am or my history, but I'm 6 years old and I am way healthier now than I was in my late 20s. And I've done a lot of deep dive into this topic of longevity. So I'm going to share with you some really important information that's going to be practical. But I want to start out showing you this clip on how medicine or science justifies longevity.
When we were all in the caves, half of everyone born was dead before the age of 30. Fast forward to 1840.
Sure.
That number went up to 35. Half of everyone born was dead by the time they were 35. So in the tens of thousands of years between living in caves and the middle of the 19th century,
we only got 5 more years.
We got since then with advances in medicine. And oh, by the way, everyone back then was eating organic. Just saying. And the water was clear, the air ran pure, the game was free range. Didn't make a damn bit of difference. Science matters here, okay? All right? You can run around and eat all the organic you want.
Okay.
You'd be dead by the 30 unless some doctor came in and said, we can increase your life expectancy using science.
Now, let me just dissect that clip a little bit because there's a bit of cherry picking going on. In the 1900s, it is absolutely true that the average person only lived to 32 years old, okay? And that's pretty low. And then as time went on, people started living longer and longer. And the question is it all because of science and medicine? That's the big question. Because in most people's mind, science and medicine is vaccines, antibiotics, and medications, right? But the only problem with that, the big spike in longevity occurred before the broad use of vaccines and the invention of antibiotics. The big spike in longevity actually occurred because of plumbing and sanitation engineers. They cleaned up the sewage in the cities, and they didn't just do it in America. They did it in France, the UK, different countries, and they showed similar spikes in longevity simply because of this one omitted fact. Back then, over half of the children died before they were 15 years old. If we take that data and we exclude it from this mathematical formula, you would see the longevity would be much, much higher. And that is because most of these children were dying of certain infections, cholera, typhoid, and dysentery, which had a chronic diarrhea component to it. So once the plumbing and the sewage situations was cleaned up, those conditions literally went away. Now, it's absolutely true that medicine then came in with antibiotics and it extended the life longer. There's no doubt. But the big question is this. If we're talking about longevity, do we want to manage disease or do we want to create health? These are two completely different things. When you manage diseases, you're not correcting causes because you still have to take the medication. You're dependent on certain drugs to keep certain things in check. I mean, right now, we have the ability to get everyone to live to be 100 years old. We just put them on life support, right, and keep them alive. But what about the quality? The quality of someone's life. Personally, I only want to live as long as I have the quality of my health. I do not want to end up in a nursing home with dementia and all sorts of problems where people have to change my diapers and dress me and feed me. That is not living. So today we're going to focus in on this right here, which is very different than this right here. I'm talking about increasing your fitness reserve so you have more capacity for health. The VO2 max is probably one of the best tests that you can do to determine your fitness reserve and also to predict how long you're going to live. So creating health is different because we're optimizing function. We're increasing the quality of your existence. We're making your metabolism more flexible and your hormones more sensitive so they can work. we're making it so you have tremendous stress tolerance and you can adapt to life much, much better. Having a very strong parasympathetic nervous system. So when you go to sleep, boy, you go into a nice, solid sleep, 8 hours, and you wake up feeling refreshed. Creating health also includes maintaining your muscle mass as you age, because there's a thing called age-related muscle mass, or sarcopenia, that a lot of people end up in, where you lose the muscle mass and a lot of your health goes down the tube. So sleep quality is very important. Gut and microbiome is very important. Making sure you don't build up visceral fat, that's the fat around the gut, is super important. And then let's compare and contrast that to medical care. If you have a sleeping problem, they will basically just give you a medication. Does that increase the quality of sleep? No, it just allows you to be unconscious for a longer period of time. I mean, even blood pressure. Are they correcting blood pressure? No, they're just lowering it. They're thinning the blood. They're giving you beta blockers to block this enzyme, so then your blood pressure goes down. And then let's just take acid reflux or bloating or indigestion, right? You take a drug. Wow. Does that ever fix anything? No, it just suppresses the symptom until you have side effects and you need more medications. So I'm not disagreeing. This model does extend your life, but at the expense of side effects and lower quality of existence. So now let's talk about Japan, okay? Japan is the country that has more centenarians, people who live over 100 years old, than any other country. Presently, they have 95,119 people that live over 100 years old. That's mind-blowing. And so we're going to dissect and go down the list and actually learn from what they're doing so we can apply it too. There is another place where people live longer than Japan, and that is Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong is not as large, so it doesn't have as many centenarians, but people in Hong Kong live a very long time. And I have some very interesting information that's very counterintuitive to why you might think people are living longer. What's so unique about Japan? The first thing that stands out is their school system. They have a very unique food and nutrition educational program that is mandated by a law. These kids are educated by dietitians that are not nearly as influenced by the junk food industry like they are in America. So they're actually teaching these kids a tremendous amount of great information on food and nutrition early on. That is going to help them in the long run. Could you imagine if you ate healthy as a child? Like, I wish I ate healthy as a child. I ate pure junk. I mean, in America, kids do get some education, but it's only like 8 hours for the entire year. And then the big elephant in the room question is, what is the quality of that health and food information? Since it comes from dietitians that are severely influenced by the junk food industry, which is a known fact. If you have any doubts of that, I will put a link down below so you can learn more about that. So the question is, what do these kids eat? They do have rice. In America, we are fed more wheat and other grains in a highly refined way, industrial starches. But in Japan, that rice is less refined. It's not genetically modified, so it doesn't have glyphosate. Now, it is true that the wheat in America is also not genetically modified, but they still spray it with glyphosate, which is an herbicide, to dry it out. In Japan, these kids are taught that fish and meat is healthy. Okay, they also do soy, but not like the soy products they have in America, where it's like soy protein isolates. In Japan, they consume fermented soy products, which is way, way different. In Japan, these children consume soup and vegetables and seaweed, which is loaded with iodine. But in that seaweed, you don't just have iodine, you have a blend of all of the trace minerals. You know, the average person in Japan consumes 9 times the amount of iodine as people in America. Iodine also is very anti-estrogenic, so it helps prevent the excess amounts of estrogen. One interesting thing about the Japanese is they do consume more salt than America, but they also consume more potassium. And if you really look at the problem with just having table salt, it's simply because you're not consuming it with the other mineral to help balance it out. People that are salt sensitive really are potassium deficient. If you consume enough potassium with your sodium, you're not going to have issues with the blood pressure. or increasing your risk of stroke, because there's something in your body called the sodium-potassium pump that feeds all the cells what they need to create the battery inside the cell. People in Japan also consume a lot of fermented soy, one of the best sources of vitamin K2. Not only helps fortify your bone and prevent bone loss, like in preventing osteoporosis or osteopenia, keeps the calcium from building up in the arteries. Now, the thing that's even more mind-blowing than that is in the microbiome of the Japanese, they have a certain microbe that is actually an ocean microbe. That microbe is able to digest certain things that Americans can't digest. But here's the thing, when you're consuming a wide range of foods in your diet, especially the fermented foods, you are going to be able to build up certain microbes that are going to greatly help you. They're going to protect you. They have specialized jobs to do all sorts of things, from making certain anti-stress hormones like oxytocin, making neurotransmitters over here. Other microbes have this special job of building up this mucous membrane for your colon to protect you against leaky gut. Other microbes make vitamins and minerals. Other microbes are defending you against attack. They're like become part of your immune system. So it's really important to have a diverse amount of foods, but especially a diverse amount of fermented foods. When you go to the grocery store in America, a lot of the vegetables are grown hydroponically in liquid without soil. So the question is, how are you going to get the same microbes in water versus soil? You can't. When you consume vegetables from actual soil that has microbes, a lot of those microbes go into the roots, into that plant, and that plant becomes a probiotic. So plants and salad and vegetables grown hydroponically don't really act like the probiotic that the vegetables that come out of your garden act like. So if you can't get access to that, let's say you don't have a farmer's market around or you don't have a garden, then you need to consume on a regular basis fermented foods, okay? Like sauerkraut, make sure it's raw. Kimchi is a good one. Fermented pickles is a good one. Raw fermented cheese, kefir, yogurt, and even a probiotic that you can grow. It's called L-reuteri, a game changer if you want to improve your health. I'll put that link down below. But we can learn from the Japanese. Fermented foods are super important. They do a lot of green tea. The phytonutrients in green tea are literally at the top of the list of what they do for your health. Preventing cancer as an anti-inflammatory, help you get rid of toxins in your liver. So adding more green tea to a part of your meals would be important. Another principle that I found out about the Japanese is they basically eat until they're about 80% full. I know myself, for years, I didn't eat till I was 80% full. I would eat until I was stuffed, and I would just keep eating. Here we have a cell, okay? And inside this cell, we have these little energy factories that basically process all the food that you eat. So you eat this food, it gets broken down, and then all this fuel comes in to this little engine motor thing right here. It's like a power plant. When you force too much fuel into this power plant, you create damage and problems, okay? And that's usually how people get in a lot of trouble of overeating. When you're cramming so many low quality calories into this motor, you're literally depleting it of nutrients, you're damaging the mitochondria, and you're setting yourself up for all sorts of metabolic problems down the road. You might be very active in exercise and be able to burn off this fuel, and that's great. So you can handle more calories, but if you're not as active, you should probably just eat enough food and not to overdo it. Now, I already talked about the salt. Balance it out with potassium foods. The foods that are highest in potassium, avocados, leafy greens. Now, another unique thing about Japan is if we just look at steps, okay, we're talking about just walking. The average person has over 6,000 steps, okay, in Japan. Whereas in America, it's only 4,000. So they have literally 2,000 more steps than we do every single day. I would recommend getting into 7,000, 8,000, because that's when things really start changing. You may also have heard different places called the blue zones, right? And you might have heard some propaganda about, oh, blue zones, they're all vegetarian, they don't eat meat. That actually is not true about Japan and other countries. They actually eat more meat than fish nowadays. So they consume an adequate amount of meat. Now, I want to flip right to Hong Kong for a second. They consume literally the most meat of any other place. An average person consumes 323.9 pounds of meat every single year. And the question is, what type of meat? They eat a massive amount of pork and a massive amount of beef. The two foods that you were told to avoid. And then the whole point about this topic is that this comes down to what I've been saying for a very long time. Find out what everyone is agreed on and everyone's telling you and go in the opposite direction. Apparently, it's not affecting people in Hong Kong. There's very few people that smoke in Hong Kong. And also they do consume a lot of seafood and they do a lot of walking. There's a lot of steps. So we have that as well. Now let's get into the 18 practical things that you can do to extend your life. Number one, insulin resistance. The reason that we're talking about insulin resistance is because this is a root cause behind so many chronic diseases, from a fatty liver to diabetes type 2 to obesity. Anything you can do to reduce this is going to be a very smart thing to live a long and healthy life. I really need to bring up the best way to test insulin resistance, because you could check your blood sugar, right? And your blood sugar can be normal for literally 15 to 20 years, despite how much sugar you eat. And that is because insulin is coming in there like crazy and sucking out all of the sugar out of your bloodstream, making it normal. Do the doctors ever check insulin? No. They're focused on the blood sugar, so they're going to miss it. So then there's another test. It's called A1C. What is A1C? That basically measures the average blood sugar for 3 months, okay? So it's just a test to look at your red blood cells to see how much sugar is connected to it. When you have the early stages of insulin resistance, your A1C could be normal for 10 to 15 years. What you have to do is check your fasting insulin. It's a much better indicator of what's really going on. Unfortunately, the doctors don't check that. And I would recommend keeping it under 7 or maybe under 5. And I know there's a lot of confusion on what normal is because there's really no agreed amount of what normal is on insulin. And I find that very interesting. I would recommend getting it under 7 or under 5. Okay. Mine is a 2, my fasting insulin. But this is a really important test. How do you keep it low? By going low carb. Keep the sugar and hidden starches out. So in other words, right here, 6, avoid sugar, okay, hidden sugar as well. And hidden sugar is in the starch, industrial starch. That's like the refined breads, pasta, cereal, crackers, biscuits, waffles, pancakes. All of that starch is hidden sugar. And when insulin goes high, that's when you're going to start having all sorts of health problems, to the point where now the insulin's not going into the cell, and now the cell doesn't get fuel, and everything starts to go downhill. Number 2, autophagy. Autophagy is your body's way of fixing damaged protein and cellular parts. What causes people not to live long is damaged cells and mitochondria and other cells. And so if you had a cleaning mechanism that can keep those cells cleaned up and renewed, you would live a lot longer. And how do you do that? With regular intermittent fasting and periodic prolonged fasting. I have a million videos on this. I'll put some down below, but you should do at least 48 or 72-hour fast. Huge. And I just did a video on a 5-day fast. You can do that periodically too, but that's one way to extend your life in a major way. Number 3, VO2 max is a test that you can get. You have to go to a certain clinic to get it, but it's the ultimate test in fitness reserve. It's one of those markers that will tell how in shape you are. All this training is going to build up and increase your ability to use oxygen, and that oxygen keeps the body from getting inflamed. It keeps your fitness level in a surplus where you have this extra reserve buffer to protect you. It will also help your sleep. It keeps your cortisol down. Very important to keep this very high. Number 4, mitochondria. Boy, a lot of problems with a shortened lifespan come from a problem with this mitochondria. So you have a couple factors, a couple variables here. You have the fuel coming into the mitochondria. Okay, the mitochondria is the energy factory. So that has to be quality fuel. And then we have all the biochemical reactions that take that food, extract different things, and turn that into energy. It's called ATP at the end of this whole assembly line. Every single biochemical reaction that occurs needs vitamins and minerals and trace minerals. This is why we need nutrition. B1, B2, B3, B5, coenzyme Q10, the trace minerals, manganese, zinc, iodine, copper, and magnesium. Okay, these are so vitally important for that mitochondria to function. So if you don't have these, the mitochondria is not going to work well. If you have too much junk food, the mitochondria is not going to work. So it could be a couple reasons why the mitochondria doesn't function right. And then on top of that, if you're consuming seed oil, that really can mess up the function of the mitochondria. So you want to avoid things like soy oil, corn oil, canola oil. There's actually a test that could be done to look at this biochemical factory in a pathway. It's called a metabolomic test. The metabolomic test looks deep in the biochemistry and it looks at the fuel coming in there. Where is the bottleneck in this factory? At what point is it building up and not getting through? Is it because you're not getting a certain nutrient, or are you not getting enough of the right fuel? Out of all the things that you see that's lacking in the diet, in the metabolomic test to allow this biochemistry to work, what would that be? High quality amino acids, animal meat. People need to consume more of that to allow this biochemistry to work correctly. But then that explains the carnivore diet. It explains why people do so much better when they start increasing their animal proteins. Okay, so I already talked about how important fasting is. You're going to live longer with fasting because your body is going to adapt and become stronger. It's hard to reach a high level of health unless you stress your body out intermittently, but you have to let it recover as well. And since we're on the topic of this right here, let's talk about heat, adding heat, whether it's a hot shower, a sauna, a jacuzzi. Some of the benefits from this heat therapy are similar to exercising. So that's pretty cool that you could just go in the jacuzzi and get a lot of the benefits from exercising, but you're just laying there in this jacuzzi. I think that's pretty interesting. Also have cold therapy. Think about what the body has to do to counter this cold bath or a cold shower. It has to maintain a certain temperature. It's turning on all sorts of genes to improve survival. And I'm not talking about trying to shock your body too long. It just, a very quick immersion into cold and then coming out, and then even going in the heat is therapeutic. But of course, you have to make sure that the heart is strong enough to handle that. Even phytonutrients are a little bit of a hormetic stress to cause an adaptation to make you get stronger. I already mentioned about exercise, but there's also hypoxia training. And you can think of this as high altitude training. They're basically training with low amounts of oxygen, and it forces the body to develop new capillaries and bigger red blood cells. You can get a mask to just restrict air. I'm doing this right now. I think it's awesome. I think it'll be the wave of the future, but it's just a way to enhance the benefit of exercise. We've already talked about intermittent fasting, but what about sun? Yeah, sun. Getting UV radiation is going to create this little stress where our body's going to adapt. Fermented foods. So you're exposing yourself to microbes, so the body is then going to adapt and actually have more diverse microbes. If you're raising a child in a super clean, sterile environment, their immune system does not develop. Our immune system gets stronger when we get an infection and we allow our bodies to overcome the infection. Now, let's go back to number 9, vitamin D. Our genes were designed to develop to get a lot of sun, and now we don't. We stay inside. So we need more sun, and we need more vitamin D. And if you really want to protect yourself and bulletproof yourself and live longer, you want a vitamin D level of at least 60 nanograms per milliliter or 80, okay? 60 to 80. Now, personally, I have mine over 100, but that's because I have a lot of old injuries and arthritis, and my body does better if I have just a little more vitamin D. But of course, I'm checking the calcium in my blood. I'm checking other factors. But if you could just keep it 60 to 80, you're going to be in really good shape. Social connections, super important for longevity. Have a lot of groups that you're involved with. When you isolate someone, they get lonely. But you can be by yourself and not be lonely, but I'm talking about the feeling of loneliness, not good for longevity. This is why when someone loses a loved one, they have what's called the broken heart syndrome, is so stressful. Their chance for a heart attack goes up to like 2,000%, I think the first week. So it's very stressful. Unfortunately, everyone has to go through that. So you want to have enough fitness to push through that and survive that. Because of this word called hormesis. What does that mean? That is putting a short little stress in the body to cause the body to adapt and become stronger. This is why exercise, a stress, breaks things down and the body adapts and gets stronger. I already mentioned when you eat, if you cannot stuff yourself, that would be a good idea. Just try to be like 80% full and then just stop. That way, we're allowing the fuel to come in to be usable with all the cofactors and nutrients, and everything's working like a machine, and we're not going to damage it. All right, number 13 is post-meal walk. It's like free metformin. Metformin is a medication for diabetes, and it helps you lower blood sugar. So it's like a free metformin without side effects. All right, we already talked a little bit about fermented foods. Super important to eat for your microbes. A little dark chocolate without sugar is very healthy for the microbes. I consume that every lunchtime. Sometimes I'll do it in the morning in my coffee. Now let's get to number 15, sleep. If you're not sleeping, you're not going to live a long time. For many years, I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and think that was a good thing. But I always needed a nap, and it caught up to me. Now I have to get at least 7.5. I'm trying to get 8 hours of sleep. I'm going to show you how to do it. It's kind of like that lifestyle change that just allows everything to work so much better. Your energy, your mood. Magnesium before bed, an hour before bed, and magnesium glycinate is pretty cool because it allows the muscles to feel calm. It allows the cortisol to come down. Also will reduce your temperature, which is interesting. So right before you go to sleep, your body core temperature actually gets a little cooler. So instead of 98.6, it comes down by 1 or 2 points. That coolness allows you to go into a sleep faster. And also it improves the delta wave sleep, where a lot of the important repair and the brain detoxification processes occur. And temperature is a very important factor. This is why you want to set the temperature at like between 62 to 68 degrees. I personally just need like a little sheet, and I keep my room really cold, and I sleep so much better than with a blanket. Now, if your feet are cold, then wear socks, but just try to keep your body just a little bit cooler to the point where it should help you sleep. The other thing is your light. We have not evolved to the current environment that we live in with all the lights. In the morning we get up and we go to our computers and we're in blue light. If you're like me, you spend a lot of time on the computer. That really messes up the circadian clock. So you need to reset it. One really easy way to do that is in the early morning, go outside and don't look at the sun, but allow some of the sunlight to go in your eyes for 20 minutes, okay? And you're getting this blue spectrum. It's at, I think the exact frequency that you need is 480. That goes into your eyes, and it helps to wake you up. And then at night, when it gets dark, if you are on your computer or watching TV, you should wear blue blockers. And that way, you'll start to restrict that blue light. The other thing is the stimulants. Too much coffee through the day, too much chocolate has another stimulant through the day. What it actually does is it takes this molecule called adenosine, and in the receptor part, it kind of blocks it. But over time, if you do a lot of caffeine like I did, that receptor doesn't work anymore. So now at night, we can't go to bed at night, and because we're like, there's no sleep pressure to push us into that deep sleep. And then in the morning, it's hard to wake up even with caffeine because that receptor now is not working. I'm telling you, out of all these things, if you fix the sleep, you're going to live a lot longer. Now, I want to talk about FOXO3 for a second because this is the gene, longevity gene, that people in Japan, in certain parts of the world, have it expressed more than others. Okay, so there is a genetic point. But the good news is you can do some things to express that gene and activate it. Intermittent fasting, endurance exercise, high intensity interval training, resistance training, a sauna, cold bath. This is the green tea phytonutrient, curcumin from turmeric, sulforaphane from broccoli sprouts. NAD, it's a supplement, but I recommend just taking the complete B vitamins because really to build this one up, you need B3. And you get vitamin B3 from red meat and liver and organ meats and other things. Having less visceral fat is going to be helpful to increase this. Running your body on ketones, that's the low carb, and having more sleep. So basically, if you follow all these things, you'll enhance this gene and live longer. Number 17, maintaining muscle mass. As someone gets older, they develop a condition called sarcopenia, where they're losing muscle mass. So it's so important to maintain resistance training and enough red meat protein or other animal protein as you get older to keep the muscle mass high. But the problem is, if your testosterone dips down, it's very difficult to grow muscle. So you want to maintain muscle mass and maintain testosterone. Testosterone is like this basic hormone that can turn into other hormones. So it's super important. So if a woman was considering doing estrogen therapy, she should probably do testosterone therapy, and then that way she can make her own estrogen as needed. So maintaining muscle mass through exercising, having sufficient protein, and all the cofactors are very important. A lot of those cofactors are going to be in muscle, like muscle protein when you eat red meat. So that's going to help you. And also magnesium is going to help with this. And then testosterone, I've done an entire video on this. Intense exercise, zinc. Oysters are the best food for zinc and red meat. Having enough sleep and having enough cholesterol. And I'm also going to assume that people that are more interested in this video are probably a little older, and they're going to need some more information about how to maintain high levels of testosterone. So I put a video right here for you to watch right now. Check it out. It's right there.